March 13, 2006. SWAT teams surround a bank. A helicopter circles overhead. Tactical units stack at the entrance. Rifles raised. They're certain the thief is trapped inside. 60 meters away, a man sits in a parked minivan, calmly finishing a sandwich. He's wearing a headset, tuned directly into the police tactical frequency. Every command, every position, every move flows straight into his ear. He hears the breach order, turns the key, and drives away. By the time SWAT storms the building, the vault is empty and the man is gone. He's been listening to them for months. He knows their response times to the second. He's robbed banks across 3 countries, parachuted onto an imperial palace to steal a crown jewel, and escaped police custody through ceiling vents at 16. But here's the twist. The man who outsmarted every alarm, every camera, every cop got caught because of the silliest mistake ever. How did one thief weaponize police radios? And what careless mistake finally exposed him? Gerald Blanchard arrived in this world wired differently. Long before his name appeared on Interpol bulletins, he was a quiet kid in Winnipeg, obsessed with how things worked. While classmates played street hockey, 8-year-old Gerald sat at the kitchen table with a Phillips head screwdriver, dismantling alarm clocks to map their gear trains. He traced circuits on his family's VCR until he figured out how to bypass the regional lock and record channels it wasn't supposed to receive. His mother found stacks of disassembled radios under his bed. Every device was a locked door, and he wanted the key to all of them. At 12, his family relocated to a small town outside Omaha, Nebraska, chasing his stepfather's job. Within months, a local bank initiated foreclosure proceedings on their home over a $2,000 shortfall. Gerald watched his mother cry at the kitchen table, powerless against men in suits quoting statutes. The sheriff arrived to post the notice on their front door. Gerald never forgot that institutions hold power, and power follows rules. But rules are just code, and this code can be decoded. By 15, Gerald had shifted from tinkering to testing real-world boundaries. He shoplifted Walkman players and cordless phones from Best Buy, then forged return receipts using his school's photocopier and walked out with cash refunds for merchandise he never paid for. The store's loss prevention systems were built on assumptions that a teenage boy with a confident smile and a receipt wouldn't be a thief. Gerald found the assumption and exploited it. At 16, he pooled his illicit earnings and bought a house, outright, in cash, while classmates worried about driver's permits. The real estate agent didn't ask questions. One frigid Nebraska night, Gerald and a friend agreed to help another teenager torch his car for the insurance payout. In a cornfield outside town, they doused the rusted Pontiac in gasoline, far too much gasoline, and struck a match. The fireball turned the horizon orange and sent black smoke spiraling into the night sky. Sirens wailed within minutes. Gerald's accomplice bolted for the tree line. Gerald did the opposite. He walked toward the approaching patrol cars, hands visible, rehearsing his concerned citizen routine. Officers smelled accelerant on his jacket before he finished his first sentence. He got handcuffs and a squad car delivered him to the Sarpy County Sheriff's Station. Inside the interrogation room, deputies left the scrawny teenager unshackled, figuring a 16-year-old in a Nebraska farm town wasn't a flight risk. They stepped out to confer with the duty sergeant. Gerald studied his surroundings: cinder block walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, a two-way mirror, and, above it all, a drop ceiling. Standard acoustic tiles, 2x4 aluminum grid, maybe 18 inches of crawl space. He climbed onto the table, pushed a tile aside, and hoisted himself into the darkness. Cold aluminum ductwork pressed against his ribs as he army crawled toward the back of the building. Somewhere below, a door opened and a deputy shouted his name. Gerald kept moving. He reached a junction above what sounded like a storage room, punched through a tile, and dropped onto a shelf stacked with file boxes. He slipped out a rear fire exit into the night air. Outside in the gravel lot, Gerald's friend sat in their idling Buick, ears glued to a Radio Shack scanner. Through the static came frantic chatter. "Suspects in the vents! Lock down the building!" Headlights flicked on. Gerald sprinted across frozen gravel, wrenched open the passenger door, and dove inside. As they peeled onto the county road, he clutched 2 souvenirs snatched from an unattended desk near the exit, a deputy's badge and a Motorola police radio. Trophies from his first successful escape. That night rewired something fundamental in Gerald's brain. Systems, locks, alarms, institutions were designed by people, and people made assumptions. The sheriff's department assumed a teenager wouldn't think to check the ceiling. They assumed a suspect wouldn't walk toward the cops. They assumed their own radio frequency was secure. Every assumption was a vulnerability. His job now was find the assumption, exploit the gap, and vanish. The feeling of outsmarting authority wasn't just satisfying, it was electric, almost addictive. Gerald wanted more. He needed more. By his mid-20s, back in Winnipeg, Gerald had refined a dangerous thesis. A bank is just a system. Vaults follow time lock schedules. Alarms follow circuit logic. Cameras follow fixed angles with predictable blind spots. The only unpredictable variable in any heist is the human response, guards, managers, and especially police. Control that variable, and you control the outcome. What if, instead of racing to escape before cops arrived, he invited them on his own schedule and walked out while they were still en route? He called the concept a reverse stakeout. Most criminals case a target, then flee when things go loud. Gerald planned to flip the sequence. He would plant surveillance devices inside a target weeks before the job. He would tap into police frequencies and map their response times down to the second. He would trigger a test alarm to clock exactly how long he had. Then, on the night of the heist, he would operate inside that window, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, and vanish before the first cruiser's tires squealed into the lot. The cops wouldn't chase him. They'd arrive to guard an empty crime scene. It sounded like a movie pitch. But Gerald was about to prove it worked, and in doing so, ignite an international manhunt stretching from the Canadian prairies to the palaces of Vienna. What would it take to catch a thief who could hear every move the police made? And what treasure could possibly tempt him more than a vault stuffed with cash? Spring 2004. A brand new Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce branch prepares for its grand opening in suburban Winnipeg. Construction crews finish drywall. Painters roll beige onto the walls. IT technicians calibrate a row of 7 ATMs. Gerald Blanchard picks the service door lock 3 nights before opening day and slips inside wearing black gloves and soft-soled shoes. He doesn't steal a single dollar, not yet. Instead, he plants a surveillance network. A wireless pinhole camera, no larger than a shirt button, goes behind a ceiling vent directly above the branch manager's desk. A $40 baby monitor transmitter, the kind sold at any Walmart, fits behind an electrical outlet near the alarm control panel. A voice-activated audio bug, purchased from a spy gadget catalog, adheres beneath the customer service counter. Gerald tests each device with a handheld receiver, confirms the signals transmit clearly, then exits the way he came, relocking the door behind him. For the next 2 weeks, Gerald parks a rented van within receiver range, sometimes in the lot of a nearby grocery store, sometimes on a residential side street, and listens. He logs the security guard's patrol intervals, 12-minute loops, starting at the front entrance, moving clockwise through the lobby, pausing at the ATM vestibule, then returning to the break room. Clockwork. He records the cleaning crew's schedule. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., 2 women who never check the server closet. He notes the camera blind spots, a 6-foot corridor near the fire exit, a wedge of shadow beside the ATM room door. He watches the branch manager punch the alarm code into the keypad each morning. 6 digits, captured clearly on his hidden camera. He memorizes the sequence. One night, at 3:15 a.m., Gerald triggers a false alarm by jiggling the service door just enough to trip the magnetic sensor, then retreats to his van to listen. 2 Winnipeg police cruisers arrive in exactly 8 minutes. Officers circle the building with flashlights, rattle the locked doors, confirm no signs of forced entry, and radio dispatch, false alarm, premises secure. They're gone in under 4 minutes. Gerald writes in his notebook, 8-minute window, minimum. On May 15, 2004, one night before the branch's public grand opening, Gerald returns at 12:04 a.m. His girlfriend Angela waits in a sedan down the block, eyes scanning the street, an encrypted walkie-talkie in her lap. Gerald jimmies the side door he pre-loosened weeks earlier and steps into the dark lobby. The alarm keypad glows red. He taps the 6 digits he memorized from the manager's shoulder movements, captured on his ceiling camera. The light blinks green. Silence. The vault is too time-consuming. He'd need a torch or explosives, and both make noise. His target is the ATM room. 7 brand-new machines lined up behind a glass door, each loaded with roughly $100,000 in banded 20s and 50s for Monday's grand opening. The glass door is unlocked, a Friday afternoon oversight by an employee rushing home for the weekend. Sometimes, even genius gets a gift. Gerald has rehearsed this moment on a replica ATM he constructed in his garage, sourced from a decommissioned machine he bought at auction. He knows exactly where to insert the pry tool, exactly how much pressure to apply before the faceplate pops. He works fast. 4 minutes, 3 machines emptied, cash cassettes stacked in a canvas duffel. 6 minutes, 6 machines down. He deliberately leaves the 7th ATM untouched, a false clue designed to make investigators think the thief was interrupted or working with incomplete information. 7 minutes in, he zips the duffel. Approximately $750,000 in banded bills. He exits through the side door, relocks it with his pick set, and slides into the Dodge Caravan waiting at the curb. No squealing tires. He pulls away with headlights off, merging onto a residential street. Angela follows a block behind. 8 minutes and 14 seconds after Gerald entered the bank, 2 Winnipeg police cruisers roar into the parking lot, lights flashing. Officers jump out, circle the building, rattle the doors, still locked, and peer through intact windows. Everything looks pristine. They radio dispatch, false alarm, premises secure. The cruisers depart. 3 blocks away, Gerald pulls into an alley and kills the engine. He listens. Through the baby monitor feed still transmitting from the ceiling vent, he hears the officer's radio chatter confirming the all clear. He allows himself a grin. The cops just guarded a crime scene without knowing a crime had occurred. Monday morning, the branch manager unlocks the front doors, flips on the lights, and steps into the ATM vestibule to check the machines before opening. 6 of the 7 units stand open, cash cassettes missing, faces pried off with surgical precision. The 7th is untouched. She screams. Investigators arrive within the hour. They dust for fingerprints. None. They pull security footage. The DVR hard drives have been physically removed from the server closet. They inspect every door and window. No visible tool marks, no shattered glass. The alarm log shows it was armed all night, except for a brief disarm at 12:04 a.m., using the correct code. It's as if the thief walked through walls. Gerald, meanwhile, listens to their baffled theorizing through his audio bug. He hears a detective suggest the night guard was in on it. He hears the branch manager deny any inside knowledge. Using prepaid burner phones, Gerald calls the lead investigator with a disguised voice, pretending to be a nervous witness who saw the guard meeting someone in the parking lot. He calls the bank's regional security office, posing as an anonymous tipster, hinting the ATM serviceman might have copied the master keys. Each call sends investigators down another dead end, buying Gerald weeks of breathing room. For a month, Winnipeg's major crimes unit chases phantoms. It's like the thief has their playbook, because, in a sense, he does. One detective mutters in a briefing, "How the hell did this ghost know our response times?" Through his ceiling bug, Gerald hears every word and smirks. Mon Singh checks his watch. His timing is near perfect. Not a single real police constable has appeared to question this raid. The shop's routine afternoon call from the security company will soon go unanswered. But by the time anyone wonders why, Singh plans to be long gone. The van was a rental. The paperwork listed a name, Gerald Daniel Blanchard. For a man who spent months outsmarting high-tech systems, it was an almost comical oversight. He had practically signed the crime scene. Investigators ran his name and felt their stomachs drop. This wasn't some lucky amateur pulling his first job. Blanchard's name connected to unsolved tech-enabled thefts across 3 provinces, and buried in Interpol's database was a flag linking him to an audacious heist 6 years earlier, one that made international headlines and had never been solved. How does a man smart enough to wiretap the police make a mistake as basic as renting a getaway car in his own name? And what exactly had Gerald stolen in Europe that put Interpol on high alert? By his late 20s, banks had become almost routine, elaborate puzzles. Yes, but puzzles Gerald had solved. He craved a target that would demand every skill he possessed, a job that would etch his name into criminal legend. Years before the Winnipeg ATM heist, on a backpacking trip through Central Europe, he found it, the CC Star. The 10-pointed hair ornament, crafted in 1864 by Viennese court jeweler Kokert, once adorned the flowing auburn hair of Empress Elizabeth of Austria, the beloved Habsburg royal assassinated in Geneva in 1898. 27 diamonds radiate outward from a lustrous Baroque pearl at its center. The star had become a symbol of imperial romance and tragedy, displayed under glass in Vienna's Schönbrunn Palace, a 1,441-room fortress protected by motion sensors, pressure plates, infrared beams, and roving armed guards. Exactly the kind of challenge Gerald couldn't resist. Posing as a wealthy Canadian tourist interested in Habsburg history, Gerald booked a private tour of the palace's treasure room. While the guide recited facts about Maria Theresa and Franz Joseph, Gerald memorized camera positions, noted the sweep patterns of motion sensors, and identified a window in a side gallery with an old-fashioned latch, no electronic sensor, just a simple brass hook. When the tour group moved on, Gerald lingered, pretended to admire a tapestry, and discreetly flipped the latch open. On his way out, he stopped at the gift shop and purchased a $20 replica of the CC Star, complete with plastic diamonds and a faux pearl. Preparations complete. The following night, a rented Cessna 172 climbed to 4,000 feet above Vienna's western suburbs. Gerald sat in the co-pilot seat, parachute strapped to his back, goggles over his eyes. The pilot, a contact he'd paid handsomely and who asked no questions, banked over the Gloriette hilltop and gave the signal. Gerald opened the door, braced against the roaring wind, and jumped. Parachuting onto the Schönbrunn roof, was the only approach that bypassed ground-level security entirely. Gerald steered his canopy toward the east wing, aiming for a flat section between dormer windows. A crosswind gusted at the last second. He slammed onto the sloped tiles, skidded, and nearly slid off the edge. For 3 heart-stopping seconds, he dangled 4 stories above a cobblestone courtyard, fingers clawing at copper guttering. He hauled himself back onto the shingles, gasping, adrenaline screaming through his veins. He bundled his chute, stashed it behind a chimney stack, and crept along the roofline to the window he'd unlatched the day before. It opened at his touch. He lowered himself inside. The treasure room glowed under dim emergency lighting, display cases casting long shadows. On a velvet pedestal beneath a glass dome sat the CC Star, 10 diamond points fanning around its Baroque pearl, catching even the faint light. Gerald approached the case, careful to avoid a pressure-sensitive floor tile he'd noted during the tour. He withdrew a jeweler's screwdriver from his belt pouch and loosened the 4 screws securing the display dome. Beneath the star, a weight sensor monitored the artifact's mass to the gram. If the load shifted too suddenly, alarms would scream, and steel shutters would seal the exits. Gerald had one chance. He palmed the plastic replica in his left hand, pinched the real star's mounting pin with his right, and executed the swap in a single fluid motion: lift, place, release. A red indicator light on the sensor base flickered. Gerald's breath caught. The light winked back to green. The weight difference, a few grams at most, fell within the sensor's tolerance. No alarm. He resealed the glass dome, tightened the screws, and retraced his path to the window. Minutes later, he was rappelling down a drainage pipe into the palace gardens, sprinting across manicured lawns toward a service gate he'd scouted earlier. By dawn, he was aboard a train to Munich, the CC Star wrapped in a dirty t-shirt at the bottom of his scuba gear duffel. 2 weeks later, Austrian cultural officials held a press conference to unveil the star to international media. Flashbulbs popped, dignitaries applauded. Not a soul noticed the piece under the lights was a $20 gift shop replica. Curators discovered the switch only during a routine insurance appraisal a month afterward. By then, the real CC Star sat in a shoebox in Gerald Blanchard's grandmother's basement in Winnipeg, Canada. That theft vaulted Gerald into the realm of criminal legend. He had parachuted onto a palace roof, swapped a crown jewel under sensor beams, and walked out undetected. If he could pull that off, what couldn't he do? Back in Canada, investigators connecting the 2004 Winnipeg ATM heist to Blanchard's name stumbled onto Interpol's unsolved file on the CC Star. The ATM phantom and the palace ghost were the same man. The case had gone cold after the bank job. Blanchard vanished, changed addresses, rotated aliases. But in 2006, 2 veteran Winnipeg detectives convinced their department to fund a covert operation. They codenamed it Project Kite. For months, the task force wiretapped every phone number and safe house they could link to Gerald. They covered their office walls with maps, photographs, and post-it notes charting his known associates, aliases, and suspected scores. Then, in late January 2007, an intercepted phone call cracked the case open. Gerald's voice, barely above a whisper. "I can't talk now. I'm in the middle of something." He was crawling through the ductwork of a credit union in Chilliwack, British Columbia, preparing for yet another midnight burglary. The task force triangulated the cell signal in real time. On January 23, 2007, at 4:30 a.m., tactical teams hit multiple locations simultaneously. In Vancouver, a dozen officers breached Gerald's condo door. Flashbang grenades detonated in the living room. Black-clad SWAT operators flooded inside, rifles raised. Gerald lunged toward a window and found a wall of gun barrels. No ceiling tile to push aside, no vent to crawl through. The ghost was cornered. Simultaneously, officers raided storage lockers and associate homes across 3 provinces. They recovered high-powered laptops, lock-picking kits, stacks of fake IDs, caches of cash in 6 currencies, wigs, disguises, police scanners, and unopened baby monitors still in their packaging. In Winnipeg, they pried open a crawl space in Gerald's grandmother's basement and found the CC Star wrapped in cloth, exactly where he'd hidden it 9 years earlier. Gerald Blanchard's long run was finally over. But in the interrogation room that followed, he had one more card to play, a psychological reversal that would leave even his captors shaken. What did Gerald know about the detectives' private lives that no suspect should ever know? And how would a man staring down 164 years in prison walk free before the decade ended? Two lead detectives from Project Kite sat across the steel table from Gerald Blanchard in a windowless Winnipeg interrogation room. Thick folders stuffed with evidence lay between them: photographs, phone transcripts, recovered loot inventories. They expected defiance, or silence, or a demand for a lawyer. Gerald gave them none of those. He leaned back in his chair, studied the senior detective's face for a long moment, and spoke in a calm, almost friendly tone. "How's Karen doing these days? Still teaching 3rd grade at Balmoral Hall?" The detective's expression froze. Karen was his wife. Balmoral Hall was her school. Neither detail appeared in any case file. Gerald turned to the second officer with a faint smile. "And your son James, he made the Bantam hockey team this year, didn't he? Left wing, if I remember right." Neither detective had disclosed their families' names to anyone on the investigation. Gerald had been listening to them for months, through unencrypted police radio chatter, through unsecured personal cell calls made from parked cruisers, through careless conversations in coffee shop parking lots within range of his scanners. He knew their routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. In that moment, the power dynamic flipped. The interrogators became the interrogated. Gerald let the silence stretch, savoring the discomfort. Bravado aside, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Surveillance footage from the Chilliwack Credit Union, fingerprints lifted from his garage ATM replica, the recovered CC Star, a storage locker inventory that read like a spy movie prop list. Gerald faced 164 years across multiple counts of theft, fraud, conspiracy, and international trafficking in stolen cultural property. He chose cooperation. Over weeks of debriefings, Gerald walked investigators through every technique he had ever developed: cloning alarm signals with modified baby monitors, eavesdropping on dispatch frequencies with off-the-shelf scanners, building full-scale target replicas in his garage for rehearsal runs, timing police responses down to the second using staged false alarms. One veteran detective shook his head and admitted, "Never in my career has a suspect explained in such detail how he beat us." Gerald personally escorted officers to the crawl space where the CC Star had waited nearly a decade, lifting it from its hiding place and handing it over with something resembling courtesy. Austrian authorities arranged its return to Schönbrunn Palace, where it remains on display today, this time under significantly upgraded security. In court, Gerald pleaded guilty to multiple counts. Prosecutors requested the maximum. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in a federal penitentiary, a fraction of the theoretical ceiling, reflecting his cooperation and, perhaps, a grudging institutional respect for the sheer audacity of his crimes. True to a code he never abandoned, Gerald refused to name a single accomplice. Every partner who had driven a getaway car, stood lookout, or fenced stolen goods walked free. Gerald served roughly 4 years before earning parole. By 2010, security consulting firms were paying him to audit the very systems he had once defeated, testing bank alarm networks, advising on radio encryption, training loss prevention teams to think like the criminals hunting them. A fox hired to redesign the henhouse. Police departments across Canada scrambled to upgrade their communications infrastructure in the wake of Project Kite's revelations. Unencrypted tactical frequencies, the ones Gerald had monitored for years, were phased out in favor of encrypted digital channels. Banks overhauled ATM protocols, added redundant weight sensors, and instituted random schedule changes for cash deliveries. Gerald didn't just steal from institutions, he forced them to evolve. Years later, Gerald told a journalist, "When you're a kid, everyone dreams of robbing a bank. I actually did it." The press dubbed him the world's most ingenious thief. He'd proven, beyond doubt, that any system built by humans contains human assumptions, and assumptions can be exploited by anyone patient enough to find them. Gerald only got caught because a maintenance worker scribbled a license plate on a napkin. Without that scrap of paper, Project Kite would have chased a ghost forever. Somewhere tonight, someone else might be scanning a police frequency, mapping a response window, and planning the next impossible heist. The game of cat and mouse never truly ends. It only moves to new frequencies. If you want to see what happens when another brilliant criminal tests the limits of modern security and nearly brings down an entire global banking network, watch our video on the Pink Panthers gang. That crew stole over $1 billion from across 40 countries, and they never needed a parachute.